For sure. So, yeah, man, it's finally got you over here. And
episode what?
Yeah, what are we, 6? Yeah, episode 6 right now. So, yeah. So, Tracy Murphy in the house. So, yeah. So, I guess we'll start off with that you are running for sheriff again for the second time.
Yes, again.
And so, who are you even running against? Do you know yet at this point?
Well, really, we're not going to know who is actually going to file. Filing week isn't until May. So, okay. Yeah. I mean, there's people that are that I've heard are saying they're going to run, and but we actually won't know until May.
Yeah.
So May's the actual official filing week.
Okay. And then can people enter after that? That's just the first opportunity to file?
It's a week for filing.
So if you don't declare in that week.
If you don't file.
Yeah.
That's where you file with the county, pay your money, and then it's...
How much does it cost to run for stuff? Is there like a...
So, well, I know for the sheriff, I believe it's 10% of the annual pay.
Okay, so whatever position you're running for,
yes,
that's kind of the metric. If you're running for city council or whatever.
But some of those that get paid, like I think some city council people get $100, $300, $500. I don't know if it's the same for them. I mean, the only one I've ever looked into was
it's just sheriff. So if you run for sheriff, it's 10% of whatever the pay is currently.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
or the last year's pay.
Yeah, and whatever they say, this is what you need to pay.
I had never even thought about the fact that you would have to pay the county. Like, I knew there were costs involved, but I'd never even thought that.
There's personal costs, financial costs. Yes, there's running for elected office costs.
Yeah. So, it's pretty crazy.
It is crazy.
So you're running, and one of the things that I like to do on this is, what is it that I mean? So I'll start with this then. I'll back up, but I've thought
just
this.
Tell me. Ask the question.
Well, no, I just want to. So one of the things that I've thought for a long time, and I think that you'd agree with this, is that your local sheriff is probably the most important position, or maybe that's not the right way to say it, but I think it has the most impact on your daily life, and maybe the most important position to get right as it affects your daily life. And I would assume you agree with that, but tell me what it is that, in your opinion, that a sheriff does and what their responsibilities are, and kind of, what is your take on that, kind of where that falls as far as importance is in terms of how much time you should spend learning about a race, getting to know the candidates, how important that is to people on a kind of a daily basis.
So to go back, I do agree. I think that it is the most important position that's going to affect you, especially locally, because of what the sheriff's responsibility is. I mean, he is the highest executive law enforcement administrator in the county. So law enforcement is there to protect us. I mean, we go back fundamentally, everybody hears, police, their mission, law enforcement mission is to protect and serve. So you go back to looking at any government position as a service position. So first and foremost, they're serving you and I, the public. And what kind of service are we going to get is going to depend on what type of person is in that office. I mean, if it's a selfish person in that position, well, it's going to be self-driven what they do. If it's somebody who is, understands what it means to be a servant and to serve others and to put others first, well, that's an important thing to have in any government position, whether it's elected or even just an employee. And then we talk about the protection. Law enforcement is to protect us. And what does that really look like? I mean, we not only physically try to protect you and keep you safe for the immediate needs where somebody's a victim of a violent crime, and that crime is going on right then and there. You want law enforcement coming and showing up to protect you and keep you from that assailant. But not only those immediate responses to your needs for safety, but it's also the investigation of crimes. Criminals continue to prey on victim after victim after victim. So the investigation side is very important, to be able to investigate crimes so that we can identify the perpetrator, hold him accountable, bring him to justice, because that keeps them off the streets and victimizing other people, and continuing that process of victimization and perpetration. And then, probably, if not the most important, is that we're the guardians of the Constitution, and we protect your constitutional rights so that government doesn't infringe into your private affairs and personal affairs. And so having that understanding of the relationship to law enforcement, that it's just not the physical protection, it's also protecting your constitutional rights. Our government is set up with the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch, and law enforcement is part of the executive branch. So the legislative branch is the one who makes the laws, and so we need to make sure that we in law enforcement are making sure that the laws that we're enforcing are constitutional, and that we're protecting your constitutional rights, that we're not infringing on your freedoms of speech and freedoms to peaceably gather, to petition the government, to protect your rights to unlawful intrusion into your private affairs. In Washington, you're more protected in the Washington State Constitution with government intrusion into your personal affairs, your private affairs, than you are in the U.S. Constitution. So having an understanding of, the importance of that protection and protecting people's rights is just important as the physical aspect of keeping you safe.
So how long or how much influence would a sheriff have at kind of the legislative level? Like if you see something that the legislature is doing in creating laws that maybe aren't, or there's an argument to be made that they're not constitutional, how involved does a sheriff get, or can a sheriff be in that part, or you just have to kind of whatever comes down the way?
Well, this is...
How does that work? Because I know there's a lot of people that, look at certain, there's just a lot of political activism, and I think people on both sides of the aisle feel that way. Whoever's in power is making a lot of there's a lot of pendulum swinging going on. Right. It's like everybody overreacts to everything and tries to do that stuff. So when you see something come through that's very obviously contrary, like what role does a sheriff have in something like that? So
communicating what the issue is with the right people. So like we have an elected prosecutor. That prosecutor is the one who would be, let's say we have the legislative body enacts a law that's unconstitutional. If there's an unconstitutional question, it goes before the courts. The judicial branch then makes the determination whether or not it is constitutional or unconstitutional. And the person who presents that to the judicial branch should be your prosecutor. But the prosecutor and all elected officials work with each other. And so the sheriff would be, if the sheriff recognizes that, hey, this could be a constitutional issue here should be bringing it to the prosecutor and forming a plan we need to get this in front of the judicial branch so that we have a decision made. And until that decision is made, because we have a constitutional issue, then that law just gets put on the back burner, and we're not going to enforce a law if it's muddy and it's not clear.
Right.
It needs to go through the process, and that's why we have a process. You can stand up on top of a chair and scream as loud as you want in public, and it's not going to make any change because that's not the process.
Right.
The process is taking it before the judicial branch and letting the judge or judges decide and apply the Constitution and the law to it to see if it is constitutional or not. If the judge makes that determination, then that it is constitutional, then we enforce it. If it goes through the court system and the courts say, no, this is not constitutional.
Okay, so kind of the primary role in that instance would be that you would be kind of the constitutional consultant to the prosecutor and go, hey, we're seeing an issue with this law. I don't know if there's a constitutional problem. I think we have to bring this to the court, get it figured out before we do anything with it. And once that's all determined, then we will just enforce that law.
Correct.
However,
now there's other groups that are private groups that will bring stuff to the courts as well, because you can't always guarantee that your prosecutor is going to do that.
Yeah.
So there's other avenues like, any Second Amendment things. You have the NRA. There's so many groups out there that will petition. So it's just having a conversation with those people in those positions to bring up issues. Now, a lot of times they see the issue as well, especially with Second Amendment stuff.
Yeah.
They see the issue. And so they're automatically going and filing petitions with the courts. So...
Yeah, I remember I talked with somebody about this at one point. It may have even been you, but talking about how the sheriff is the only person that you can actually elect that is structurally more accountable to the people than the government. Like you are kind of the last stop for the people, and you kind of represent the people in a way that other public officials don't have to. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, all elected officials answer to the people, and we don't need with law enforcement and with the sheriff. If the sheriff isn't doing what the sheriff is supposed to be doing, getting a committee, even if the legislator says, well, you have to have an oversight committee to oversee what the sheriff does, that committee has zero power, because the power for the position of sheriff comes from the Constitution and the law. And so a committee can say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. The sheriff doesn't have to listen to them, because ultimately it's the people. But we have in place in our Constitution to recall elected officials who are not doing their job. And I think that we as the people aren't taking as big of an active role as we should to make sure that our elected officials are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that they're doing what they're enjoined by law to do, and if they're not, then we need to get them out of office. And you can get them out of office by not voting for them the next time, or you can petition to have them removed.
Yeah.
And I think that, our Constitution and the power that we, the people, have is so great. I just don't think that we're using it, when it's necessary.
Yeah.
If that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it sort of does. I think, because you see a lot of things on the news about, city councils in bigger cities, or even in smaller cities like where we live. They'll try to lean on the sheriff to do these things that are pretty clearly not ethical or not legal. And so who you elect as sheriff makes a huge difference. And we've seen that, we saw that through COVID. We've seen that through, different Second Amendment laws that, you've seen play out throughout the country where, these sheriffs sort of get, in the California fires, there's things where they're asking sheriffs to do things, and some of these executive legislature folks think that they're the king of the world. And it's really important that the sheriff understands that they don't work for the legislature. They work for the people, and they're only accountable to the Constitution as, that's the only thing higher up in the chain on that, in that vein.
Right.
And that they can go, we're not doing that.
Right.
I mean, the amount of times you see somebody who's like a council person, just grilling some sheriff, telling them to do something that's obviously illegal. And they're just shocked that the sheriff's like, we're not doing that. And they're like, but I'm the city council person, or I'm the mayor of this city, or whatever. And like, they just have no idea structurally how this even works. And I think that's, what you're talking about is that I think, something that comes up consistently on this that I've been thinking a lot about for a while is just the issues that come with prosperity. And I think one of the big problems that comes from a lot of comfort and a lot of ease is that we're not engaged as a society anymore. Where, the Romans talked about it, bread and entertainment, you can pretty much get the people to do anything as long as, you give them food and something to be entertained by. They'll just kind of, go full Wall-E. And
well, it's kind of like a car. You can drive hundreds of thousand miles on your car, and you can put it on cruise control. I mean, shoot, now with Tesla, you can just drive itself, and you sit behind the wheel and let the car do everything.
Yeah.
And I think that we've gotten into this because of the comforts that we have in this country. We've gotten into government is just on autopilot, and we're just sitting there letting the car do what it is the car does, but we're not thinking about the maintenance of things and making sure that things are continuing to function the correct way. And that just happens. That happens when just even in our daily lives, our personal affairs, things get easy and we just go on autopilot.
For sure.
We forget to do the maintenance. And then when you're going out to mow the yard, you can't start your lawnmower because the last 5 years you haven't done your maintenance on it.
Yeah. And
so it just becomes an issue. But to get back to what we were talking about as far as the sheriff in that position, the difference between a chief of police and a sheriff is huge. A chief of police, just like you were talking about, he answers to either the city manager or the city council or a mayor. So he's answering to other electeds. He's not answering to the people. So it's a lot easier to be swayed and to do things because of the pressures from up top, where you might, for fear of losing your job, you might go down that road and be a little more hands off on stuff and politically correct because you're thinking about your position.
Yeah, and I actually just learned that like really, really recently and so you don't vote for a police chief.
No.
Because they're hired by the city council. And so I didn't realize that. I mean, I guess I knew it because I've never voted for a police chief, but I just never had connected the dots, and that is a huge difference.
It is a huge difference, and that's why the position of sheriff is so important. That office, it is the people's office.
Like you can't be fired by anybody other than the people.
Correct.
Other than the voter.
Yep, correct. And so I'm getting over a cold. Yeah. Not contagious.
Yeah, it's all right.
I mean, I went through this. My dad was a fire chief, and so growing up, I actually got to see the struggles that he had, dealing with some elected officials and city managers, and just everybody doesn't know everything. And so you get people in a position where they want you to do something that, hey, we can't do this, and they don't understand why, and they're not willing to listen to the why. So
Right.
it becomes frustrating. And I'm like, you know what? That just does not interest me at all. I like my job. I like what I like what I do. In law enforcement, I over 30 years, and I have just as much fun now as I did when I first started, because I don't have the pressures of doing things that are not right. I know that I'm not going to be fired if I'm doing my job. So all I need to do is just do my job. And my job is very clear. We have policies, procedures, laws, the Constitution. As long as I'm operating within those boundaries, then I'm going to be fine. I don't have to. Nobody's going to pressure me to, hey, let this person go. I don't want you to do an investigation into them. Well, no. I mean, the law and the Constitution apply to everyone equally. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter your race, religion, your political affiliation. None of that matters. I mean, this is the beauty of our Constitution and our country. The Constitution and the law apply to everyone. And, it's equal justice under the law. And so I was never worried about losing my job because I'm protected. But an appointed position, I'm protected under civil service rules that governing the hiring of police and fire. And so I don't have to worry about, somebody from the outside telling me I can't do this, or no, the law is very clear, and you can't just fire me without just cause, and you have to show that I violated the law or I did something. If you're giving me an unlawful order, I don't have to follow that. But then when you get into these positions where it's an appointed position, you're at will. And so you don't have the same protections. So that's why I've just never had an interest in being a chief.
Yeah.
Sheriff is completely different.
Yeah. And I think, so, on that note, I've known some of the people who've been police chiefs, and I had just recently found that out. I think it also kind of speaks to, how much more, one of the things that we hope to do with this is help everybody be a lot more educated about how our local government actually works, who you should be mad at and what you can do about it, and I know like police chiefs get a lot of heat over, well, you're not doing this thing or this thing's that. And I know that I had kind of gotten into this a little bit with some people and realized like, well, they don't actually get to make all the decisions on that, or not without, so I think there can be a situation where they're making kind of a risk benefit analysis about a lot of those things, going, well, okay, if I stick to my principles on this thing, I could win this battle and then lose the whole war, and then they'll just put somebody in behind me who will do whatever they want.
Right.
Which is that good? And so they're constantly having to try to go, do I stay here and do less than what I would like to do so that I can try to effectuate change and protect the people from somebody who will just do whatever they're told? Or do I, and that's why politics is such a messy thing. I think we have so little grace for politicians because there's so many of them that are just absolute narcissistic trash bags, but
well,
I mean,
and that's the importance of a sheriff being engaged, because the sheriff's responsibility is to every citizen within their jurisdiction. In Lewis County, it's every citizen within Lewis County.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're in an unincorporated area or an incorporated city. The duty of the sheriff is to all the citizens within the county. And so the engagement of the sheriff in the relationship with the police chiefs is very important, because that is who should be speaking to the other elected officials if the police chief is having issues. Because at the end of the day, it's going to fall on the sheriff to make sure that, we're keeping the people of Lewis County safe and secure. Like that is the ultimate responsibility. And so the sheriff has to be engaged. Now, there's a lot of, I bring up this, issues of city councils and elected, that you run into this issue. It doesn't mean that we have bad city councils. That I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I don't want to be in a position where this might happen to me, because right now we've got good people in positions that seem to, and they're saying this, and they're saying that public safety is a priority. And so when our elected officials no longer think public safety is a priority, then we have a problem. But they're all saying public safety is a priority, and we have had such great support in this county for our law enforcement. So we're very fortunate, and I think that's probably a big reason why I can sit here today and say I enjoy my job just as much now as I did when I started, because we've always had support of our elected officials. We've had support of the people of this county. So it is different when you step outside the boundaries of Lewis County and you see what's going on.
Yeah.
But 100%, it's because of the people here. It's because of the electeds here. Yes, you get a few that are not, but the goal has always been public safety. And so, yeah. So
just to kind of clarify my thinking, so as usually you think about if somebody's in a county position that they don't really have anything to do with the cities, but you're saying that as a sheriff, you work pretty closely with all the police chiefs within city limits as well, and then also are kind of their main advocate to the other politicians for.
That's how it should be.
That's how it's supposed to work.
That's how it's supposed to be. Because if
you don't do that, if you don't step in the gap there, then they're just left twisting in the wind, and so you have to be an authority to go to the council people. And again, like a lot of these positions, I've gotten so much more grace for politicians since I've been talking to people more often. It's like the amount of things that we ask people to handle in the government that they probably shouldn't even be addressing at all. It should not even be on their plate, but then we go to them, and that gets into a whole other discussion that I'd love to have sometime, just about, how people view the government in their lives, and how they've kind of, as a society, we've tried to phase God out of our lives, and we've just replaced that position with government officials. Zoran Mamdani, said something when he got elected that, there's no problem too big for the government to solve, and no problem too small for the government to care about. And I thought, that's a really interesting tell on where a lot of these politicians, what they think their place in the world is, and it's sort of a godlike figure. Because if you were in a church, a pastor would say the exact same thing to you about how God views your life. Like there's no problem too big for God to fix, and no problem too small that God doesn't care about it. And so it's interesting to watch people use what would historically be like religious descriptors for omnipotent authority and apply it to themselves and the government. And so I think when we get those things mixed up, I can't remember, maybe you can look this up, because I'm like the worst quote butcher. I got so many things rolling around my head. I can't remember who said it, and I always feel bad at it. But there was I think it was an old British pastor that said that, I don't know if it was G.K. Chesterton or who, but he said something to the effect that, when you remove God from a society, you don't just get nothing. You get something else that goes into its place, and there's something about the way that people are wired, obviously, that they long for that. And so you can't just take God out of the equation and then have nothing there. Like something always comes into that place. And so, and this gets into a much larger scale discussion, but I think that becomes an issue when we don't put government in its proper place. We're looking for elected officials oftentimes to be, moral leaders, and if they can be, great, but I think it's best if we elect people to do a specific job that's fairly limited in scope. So I think it's an important thing that that we sort of, this county is pretty libertarian, I think. I think the kind of the defining characteristic of a lot of people around here is like, just leave me alone. They're not even always like socially conservative or fiscally conservative. It's like very much libertarian, which I have, I think anything in its most extreme form ends up being not very useful. But, it seems like that's kind of, somebody told me that once, and I thought, man, I think that's true. I think people think that we've got a conservative county. I'm not sure that that's true. I think it's more libertarian than anything, and it tends to side more with conservative principles because historically that's kind of smaller government.
But if you go back,
I think it's easy to sway in all kinds of directions.
If you go back and just look that, we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Yeah.
So government is the people. And so when you look at, and I don't know what the statistics are nationally, but just even this last election cycle, how many registered voters voted? We're talking, less than 30%. So less than 30% of the voters voted. So right now, that's our government.
Yeah, no,
that's the people taking an active role in our government to do stuff that makes these decisions on our everyday lives. 70% are not engaged in this government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. So to me, that is the biggest issue. It's really hard to say conservative, not conservative, when over 70% are just not even engaged in what's going on. The importance of our government is, if you are allowed to vote, then you should be voting, because this government is you.
Yeah.
Like, that is you. And people say that, my vote doesn't matter. Well, I can tell you, you not voting does matter. It matters hugely in what this country looks like. We don't want the government to be taking over and doing everything. That's not what our country was founded on.
No.
You start looking at who took care of the widows and the needy. Well, that was the churches. Mm-hmm. When you look at why churches don't pay taxes, it's because of what they were doing to the community. Well, now what we've done is, we're taking that away from the churches who are doing it out of the goodness of their heart and doing it to please and honor God, because the Bible tells us, to do that. Now we're allowing the government, or we're allowing this small minority to do the voting, to put people in positions to make the decisions for us, the people. And it gets back to, we're so comfortable in this country that, there's not a lot of things that we have to do in this country.
No.
You have to pay your taxes. What else do you, if you get a summons for jury duty, you have to show up. But you don't have to join the military. You have to sign up for selective service, but you don't have to join the military. So in some countries, a lot of countries, it's mandatory that you do your time in the military. But what we have to do to be a U.S. citizen is not a lot.
No.
But the most important thing that we should be doing is being engaged with the government process, and at least voting. Educate yourself on who people are. In this day and age, with the ability to access information,
Absolutely.
it is so easy. I mean, how many hours do people spend just doing this, scrolling?
Yeah.
They start looking up one thing, and now 2-3 hours later, they're still doing it, and they realize all this time that has gone by.
Yeah, like what? The sun went down.
It
I got home and I started doing that, and now the sun's gone.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it becomes what we're placing as a priority. Listen, as an American citizen, the priority should be being engaged with government, at least by educating yourself on who these people that are running for positions and to vote. And
Yeah.
if you have questions, pick up the phone and call.
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk to these people that are running. You can ask your questions. 5 minutes on the phone.
Well, and that's a lot of how the whole thing got started, is that, you know, me and Micah had been talking for years about how, like, it's really difficult to get good information, you know, anything comprehensive on who your local politicians are, or who's running, or what they even think about stuff. Most of us, I mean, don't even know what these people do.
Right.
You know, like what their job is. And so it's hard to even hold them accountable on that you know, because there's a lot of times people get elected for one thing, but they really want to be king of the world. And so they run it like that. And so if you don't even know what they're supposed to be doing, you can't even go, well, that's not in your lane, you know. But if you don't even know what the lane is,
right.
You know, so that's something we're kind of hoping. I wanted to check on this. Can we figure out how many people are eligible to vote in Washington State, and how many people are registered? Like how many are voting age, and how many actually are registered, and then how many people actually vote, and what that looks like just on a state level, or even on just a county level.
I don't know if you could find out how many people based on age are able to, because there's so many.
No, but I mean,
there's so many parameters.
We should be able to
within that.
look up eligible voters,
but registered voters. You can look up who is registered. But if people aren't registering to vote, there could be a reason. Just because it's a specific age isn't.
No, I mean, we're
you.
not going to know exactly, but I think through census and polling and things like that, they have estimates on, you know, how many people could register that don't. Because I would be really interested to know. I mean, I say this all the time with my daughter's lately been wanting to watch like Dancing with the Stars, and so like, I mean, they will get 100 million votes, you know. And granted, I get like, not, you know, people are voting multiple times and stuff like that, but you know, 100 million votes for a TV show that has dancers on it to decide who goes on to the next round. And, you know, so even if it's 10% of that are the number of people, which I'm sure it's a lot higher than that, like 10 million people voting for a dance competition, we can't get, you know.
Right.
I mean, how many people voted for sheriff last time around? Like 2,500?
I don't remember the numbers.
It's like,
it was just,
or 5,000.
It was again, like around 30% of the voters voted.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a lot. And that's that's probably one of the most disheartening things, is just to see the engagement, especially from a law enforcement side. You know, we don't care whether you vote or don't vote. You know, you're going to be protected regardless. So
in Washington, it's saying a little over 6 million people are quote unquote able to vote, approximately. And it says we have, okay, so this is saying that we've got 80% of the voting age that's registered, and then 80% of those actually cast a ballot, which I would venture to say is way higher than most places, if that's true.
I think so, because you got to break it down county by county.
Yeah.
To truly see what those percentages are.
Yeah, but that's actually, I expected it to be way lower than that, because I believe in presidential elections, it typically is around 45% of registered voters are voting. But I think.
Yeah, you have more on on a presidential election year, you're going to have more voters that turn out. But even looking at this, you still have 21% of the voters not voting, and look how
well, and this is saying, at the end of all these numbers, it's saying 63% of all people of voting age actually cast a ballot in 24.
Yeah, so 63.
Yeah.
60%. So we're still almost 40% are not. That's such a high number of people not engaged.
It's pretty wild. And I mean, I've talked to several people, just work or, guys that work with us or friends that we have, and, people that are our age that had never registered before. And I think one silver lining to some of the political turmoil that we've seen is that, it's causing some people who just been totally disengaged to go, I should probably be paying attention a little more. Like, this is getting a little out of hand. And so that's, kind of the silver lining to some of this stuff. Yeah, I mean, and, I've talked to quite a few people who are kind of the generation ahead of where we're at. And it's been really interesting to me that they're still, things were so good for so long during their kind of peak earning years that a lot of them are still very hesitant to engage in anything political. There's kind of a mentality, I think, that, during that time where it's like, kind of that famous Michael Jordan quote, like, well, somebody's giving him a hard time about, like, why don't you speak up more politically? And he's like, well, Republicans buy shoes too,
right?
And so he took a lot of heat for that. But, I think in that generation, like that age of person, they're like, there's a lot of money to be made. I don't want to make waves. And, things aren't that bad. And things are running along fine. I'm relatively safe. I'm relatively prosperous. Things are pretty normal. I'm just going to stay out of it. And so we had a whole generation of people that weren't engaged in politics, who weren't running for office. And I think one of the things that I've been really encouraged by is the amount of people that I know in this area who could make a lot more money not being in office and could live much better lives not doing public service, who are engaging and getting involved. And it's been really encouraging to see that we're starting, I think, to turn a corner. I think you're seeing this all over some. I mean, there's still a lot of crazy stuff going on, but we're starting to see more people, whether people like Trump or don't like Trump, like his life would undoubtedly be better and easier if he wasn't president. Like he'd be, and conspiracy people will probably have a field day with that. But like, either way, I mean, there's people that you see all over the country that are starting to get involved because I think they're recognizing that, times are different and things are getting a little out of hand in some areas. And I think it's been encouraging to see people kind of take a portion of their life and go, I'm going to do something worse for me that is better for my community, and so that's been really encouraging. And so I think as a voting populace, it kind of behooves us to get engaged, make sure that we vote. You don't, and I think you touched on this earlier. I think it's a really important point because, whether it's at the county level or the state level or the national level, like we've got to have people making the case that you don't vote because you think your vote is going to win the election. You vote out of a sense of duty. Yes. And that, I've told, I have a son that's voting age, and I'm like, and he's living in New York right now. And so obviously, if he, is a more conservative voter, it's, that side is not going to win there. But I think what people discount is even when you're on the losing side, no matter what state you live in, if you live in a red state and you're always voting blue, I think it still matters that you cast a vote because you see politicians and whole parties change course based on some of those numbers. Right. If somebody narrowly wins, they will moderate pretty quickly to be able to capture, some of that, more moderate wing of the next base. And politicians are, they are poll-driven animals most of the time. And so you do have an impact, even if, and I've always been kind of an advocate of this, and I know some people hate this idea, but, if you are, let's say, a Republican voter and they're putting somebody out there that doesn't represent your values, vote for a third party that more accurately does. That was something that people did a lot early on in the political process in the country's history, where they would go, well, let's just vote for another party. And then the Republican or the Democrat would see like, oh man, like 15% of our base voted for this more liberal or more conservative or more union focused candidate or this more whatever. And even they would change some of their political leanings to try to, if you're being charitable about their motives, to try to represent that group.
And seeing that becomes the problem with politics, because it makes it so muddy. It's very simple. It is, you need to have an understanding and believe what it means to be a public servant and to serve others. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Most of these, kind of this gaming side of things, you're trying to game it so you can get elected. It's like, okay, it seems like it's a lot of self-service instead of public service is what it should be. And it goes back to people, like being engaged and calling and talking to that, that person that's running for that position. Like, be engaged. Ask them the questions. Don't take it off what you're reading on Facebook and on X and in the media. And, if you've got questions or if you've got concerns and you're hearing this, you're hearing these things, call and be engaged, because it does seem like a game. What do we need to do then to get these people? Well, you should be engaged with those people, and you should be reaching out to those people to just give them your platform and tell them what it is that you're doing and your values, your ethics, your morals, elected officials are not above the law. I mean, they actually have more, there's specific crimes that they can commit as elected officials that nobody looks at, because they forget, or they don't know that they're held to a higher standard. We're held to a higher standard. There's laws to protect the people. The Constitution protects the people. I don't like the game of politics. And that's why the whole legislative side has no desire to me, because it seems like that's so much game playing as far as policy making and everything else. I like law enforcement because it's the rule of law, it's the Constitution, it's very clear. I'm not making policy, I'm not setting policy, I'm not getting caught up in these things that are completely outside of the lane that law enforcement is. So, because it can be extremely frustrating when you're looking and you're seeing and they're, well, let's do the polls, let's figure out this, let's just get back to just being open and honest with people and let them make the decisions without all this noise and distractions.
Yeah. So, yeah, and just to kind of wrap up that thought too, I mean, I think one of the things that I've come across a lot lately is that I think we are asking government to take on too many things in our daily lives, just overall, both sides. And I think the more that government can say, this is not something we're going to be involved in, like, you need to figure that out. Like, it can get handled. It's a lot of these things are too broad of issues for a machine as cumbersome as the government to deal with in an effective manner. And a lot of times, it's like I was a part of a thing where at the planning commission where there's a group of people that wanted us to regulate a certain segment of something that was going on. And there's probably some things that need to happen there. And I think one of the things I really liked about the process that we went through was that at the end of the day, we decided to just say, we're not going to regulate it. We're going to just turn this back over to your community and you guys take care of it. If it still is a huge issue and you can't figure it out, we will. But I really liked, and I can't really take any credit for it. Our chair kind of spearheaded that idea, and I thought it was really appropriate. And it was really cool to see, and we're just doing little land use things, not anything crazy, but I think it's something that can be duplicated, obviously, at any group of public officials doing anything.
Right.
You could say, I hear what you're saying. Let's get both sides of your community together on this thing. Try to help you guys establish a framework where you can just work it out yourselves and keep us out of it, because there's just not really a whole lot the government does that is as effective as if somebody smaller in a community just took care of it.
Well, and the problem with over-regulating is, it might be regulated now because maybe there was a need, but it never gets looked at, and it becomes the now norm, and it never gets gone back and looked at. So now we have this issue that happened here, but years down the road, it's not an issue anymore, but yet we're still having these regulations that are affecting what people can do on their own property.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go into building code stuff and other things that, adopting the international codes where, right. International codes are great. But depending on the area you live in and the snow or the no snow load that you ever have, like, why are we doing international codes on things that don't even affect us? Because that stuff costs more money. I think sometimes it's like, the easy route is to say, yes, we're going to adopt an international code, because then the people in those positions don't have to do the work to set the own code. So it just becomes easy. We get back to, we've made things so easy.
Well, and a lot of these things,
it's not easy. Government is not easy. Doing any public service is not easy. It's a lot of work. Well, if you're in that position, do the work. Yeah.
And I think the truth of the matter is that almost every issue is too big for government to solve. It's just, that's what, going back to, we're talking about benevolent, like community benevolence, like the reason that it was always handled more effectively, and not that churches have done everything perfectly. I mean, nobody's making that argument. There's people in there, just like everywhere else, and they're going to mess stuff up. But, the reason it worked was just because structurally, if you had somebody that had a need in the community and they were connected to the church, it's a different proposition. Like, we're giving you money, or we're helping you get a job, and we know you, we see you every week, and you are kind of loathed to take that help because you know everybody, but you can take that help, and you're incentivized to get off of that help so that you don't have to deal with that. But when you take the community aspect out of benevolence, and it's just government, a nameless, faceless entity that doesn't know you don't know them, and they're just cutting checks. And the incentive structure for the person cutting the checks is to spend all the money,
right? Not
to make sure that the right amount of help is going to the right amount of people, or the right people in the right situations. It's just, it becomes way too decentralized. Well, and now you can't do it effectively, and it's just, we're just hemorrhaging money in certain areas because we're just cutting checks to applications. Right. We're not even dealing with people on a personal level, which is messier, more difficult work. I mean, I think it trickles through a lot of these things. When we're, talking to Sean about the, the homeless issue and the drug, issue that kind of accompanies that. The hard thing is that there's no government program you can implement that's going to take care of that, because it's a person-to-person thing. Like, you have to get involved in people's lives.
Right. And that becomes...
And the government can't do that effectively.
When you get back to talking about the church, it becomes what is the final authority? The final authority for those people and the people in the church is God. And what does God say? I mean, the greatest commandment in the Bible is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. The second is to love your neighbor as yourself. So these are relationship issues that, you're having a relationship with God and you're doing what God wants you to do to please and honor him. Yeah, there's a lot of sacrifices. Everybody knows that in any relationship, that if you care about somebody and they're, the way you treat them, the way you talk to them, the way you deal with them is completely different when you have a relationship with them versus it's somebody you don't. And so when you look at who the final authority is, if God's the final authority and the Bible is your authority and that's what guides you in your benevolence, in your dealing with people, you're going to be way more successful because you're taking an interest in them and it's not about you. It's that servant heart. It's that servant attitude. And government, especially when it gets so big, it is just about, okay, we've got these forms. We focus on making sure that if the money is supposed to be spent here, that it gets spent. We're not looking at the end result. And that's why you look at the last 10 years of how much money has been spent on homelessness. Well, what's the success story percentage-wise versus the amount of money that's been spent? Are we putting the money in the right places, or is it just to tick a box to say, hey, we're doing this? You know how you can tell we're doing this? Because look at how much money we've spent.
Yeah.
If you buy a lemon of a car or a house what's that movie? The Money Pit.
The Money Pit, yeah.
That you buy a house and you are dumping money after good money after good money after good money after good money, and the house keeps falling down or the car still won't run. At some point, you got to change what you're doing.
Yeah.
That is not working.
Yeah. It's that insanity thing of,
doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Yeah, no, I think, Thomas Sowell talks about this, that, everything, the performance of anything is really based on incentive structures. Because people do what you pay them to do, bottom line. And so the issue is not that, is the government ineffective or is this institution not working? You don't have to necessarily tear down an institution to fix it. What you need to do is the argument that you need to realign the incentive structures so that, and there's lots of good ways to do it. And then I think this gets into are there people, redirecting that money for personal uses, and, do they not want to fix it so that, there's all kinds of stuff that happens there. But, when you take, for instance, with our public schools, I know flooring companies that would get calls every year at the end of the year, and they go, look, we have X amount of dollars left in our budget this year. We don't know what else to spend it on. Will you just redo all the carpets that you just did last year? Because if we don't spend the money,
we're not going to get it again.
They won't give us that same budget. And what if we need that money next year? And so the incentive structure is set up not to be responsible fiscally. It's to spend the money. And that's the wrong incentive structure. And there's very easy, practical ways that you could do this. I think my favorite idea that I've heard is that you set up something where you go, well, if you don't spend all the money in your budget, that's great. You can take that. We'll take that money and we'll give you the same budget next year. And whatever you didn't spend, we can put it in a, interest-bearing account that conforms with, governmental laws about how you can invest money and all that stuff. and we'll give you the same budget. So you can be responsible to the people's money. And theoretically, not very far down the road, you've got enough money in that account for that institution that's gaining interest, and it's being invested in the American economy, which is also useful for people to get jobs and to spur innovation and all those things. And then it becomes a self-funding institution, because eventually that pot gets big enough where that, 3 or 4 or 5%, even if it's just conservatively invested, is enough to foot the whole budget. And now you're not taking any tax money from people. And I mean, you could do that with any institution.
But I don't think I don't think you'll ever get it to where it's going to be self-sustaining, because with new technology and requirements in the law that now you have to do A, B, and C, you're going to have things that are going to cost money, but it will help eliminate the need to constantly going back to the taxpayers to get more money, more money,
right.
more money.
Yeah, whether it ever becomes self-funding or
right.
not. And I think eventually it definitely could.
The hope would be, yes, you could. But
even if it doesn't, you're right. I mean, that's not even necessarily the point. It's kind of irrelevant. It's like, it's just a good stewardship thing to do.
Look at businesses. Well,
that's how you have to operate as a business. Yeah.
For incentivizing people, if you have people if you're dealing with constant misuse of sick leave, they're constantly gone. There's businesses and organizations out there that incentivize their sick leave program, that if people don't use sick leave through the year, that they get an incentive, whether it's additional vacation days rolled into their bank, or so now you have people that it's like, you know what? Yeah, I could take the day off sick, but I'm not really sick. I'm going to go to work because I want to get that other leave time. There's ways to incentivize us as individuals, because we're people. Yeah. We can take the easy route.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily blame the country for where we're at. It's a human nature issue, and you see it all throughout history with different civilizations.
But if we're allowing it,
but that is what we do. Like, we are going to take the path of least resistance, by and large, unless you are standing on some sort of principle. But yeah, I think But all that to say, I think incentive structures really are the key issue, and I think it's something as a voting public we can make more of a big deal, that we don't have, because we're so extreme at this point, with our political stuff. It's like, you got to get rid of this thing and you got to get rid of that person, and everybody just keeps getting more and more extreme. And it's like, what if we just focused on making sure that the incentive structures are properly aligned, so that no matter who goes in there, that is the argument that Sol makes, is that you can, if you have good incentive structures, you can take somebody who's not a good person, put them in an environment where all the incentive structures steer them toward the more proper end goal,
right? Because they want to get more for themselves,
and they're highly so it's aligning, it's being realistic about what human nature is, knowing
tapping
what you're
into that vein,
tapping into that, and then structuring things in such a way that you get the desired outcome, no matter who you put in the chair. And so you're not so reliant on, was this a good person or a bad person that's going into this position? You could get to a place where no matter what kind of person you get through, they're more likely than not to end up with the desired results, because it's the most beneficial thing to them personally.
So growing up, I was taught that was consequences. There's consequences for our behavior, whether they be good or whether they be bad consequences. There's a consequence for your behavior. So if you do something good, this is what you get. If you do something bad, this is this is the consequence. It is incentive based.
Yeah. But we don't do consequences anymore.
It becomes the word. We don't want to use the word consequence, but the reality is there's consequences for everything we do. I knew that if I did this, this, and this, that it could result in a spanking or a grounding,
right.
or, that's, and I knew because that happened, there was consequences. Now, there were times that grace was shown to me, and I really appreciate the grace.
Yeah.
But you know, it just becomes that, you know, I don't know if these generations that are growing up now really understand the consequences. I mean, even in sports, like if you didn't come in first, you didn't get the first place award. But now it seems like you just do your best as hard as you can, and that's good enough. That's not reality in life, because you can do your best and as hard as you can, and things will come up, and your best is not good enough.
Yeah, no, that's what spurs you on. I mean, it's one of my favorite things to I mean, for my own life, it's like the only reason I've ever gotten good at anything is because of the setbacks and the challenges and the times I wasn't good enough.
And you have
I had to make a
learned.
decision, and I had to go, am I willing to accept what this level of effort gets me, or do I need to be better, you know, as, you know, a husband, a father, a friend, a citizen? Like, you know, I mean, I've had setbacks and failures at like every level of my life.
And we all have. And
Yeah.
you've learned to overcome those, or you've learned to, okay, this is where I can get help to help me overcome these. The problem is that we have people that don't know when they fail, when they become an adult and they get out there on their own and they have failures, it has such an impact on their life because they have never experienced failures growing up, and they've never had the opportunity to learn and get the growth from it. So now you have this, you know, I mean, it's like their whole world is falling down. And I think that has an effect on where we are on our drug problem, that you have good people that were raised in good homes that now they're in addictions. Well, addictions are just an escape from what's going on. And so, you know, if we're not equipping our kids, so as a parent, you know, that's your primary goal is to raise your kids to be positive members of society.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
productive.
Productive, to, you know, that when we're not, and when they fail growing up, that's where we're coming alongside them and we're helping them learn. It's not and grow. It's not it's not, failure is not the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's if you fall, what are you going to do? Are you going to get back up and keep trying? You might fall again. Are you going to get back up and keep trying? You know, and that becomes that humility thing too, because sometimes our pride gets in the way and we don't want to admit to the failures, and we start pointing fingers that it's somebody else's fault, or instead of just let's evaluate us, some self-reflection, some evaluation. Let's get the pride out of the way and just humble ourselves and like, okay, this has happened. What do I need to do? I'm gonna pick myself up again. I'm gonna try again. I'm gonna keep trying, and I'm gonna keep trying, and I'm gonna keep trying.
Yeah. I came across a thing I thought was so well put that, you know, confidence comes not, you know, when you stop looking at failure as like a negative and you just start looking at it as data. You know, when you just start looking at all the times you didn't, you know, I mean, sports analogy would be, you know, you don't win a game. Okay, so what were the things that we would have needed to do better?
Yeah.
Or what did I need to do better in my specific position that I can do? And then you just start looking at everything as data. There's a famous college basketball coach that he would, I think it was the Kentucky, anyways, you know, perennial powerhouse. Not a big college basketball fan, but he used to tell, I mean, he would get the best players in the country, you know, like basically the 12 best guys would all go to his program. And the first thing he would talk to him about is like, you need to come in here and fail early and often so we can fix it before the season gets going.
Right.
You know, like this, you know, and then so he would kind of remove the air of like, you have to be perfect around here. It's like, you come in here and you just play and you do, and we're going to just work on fixing all the stuff that needs to get fixed so that by the time the season comes, so don't try to be perfect. Don't play tight. Don't, don't worry about looking dumb or missing shots or all. Like, we're gonna fix all that so that by the time the season comes, we're a well-oiled machine. We win every game and win a title. And I think we could do several podcasts on what we're talking about here, because there's some really interesting stuff that I've been digging into lately. But we've got this safety culture that nobody should get injured, hurt, or even be at risk of potential injury or sickness or anything. We've got a no failure culture. Starting in public school, it's like failure is looked at as a bad thing and not an opportunity to teach
and to grow. But
it should, and so we kind of have this messaging, and a lot of this, and I've heard some really interesting stuff, which I think maybe there's some validity to it, that it kind of springs out of this kind of feminist culture of like, women are nurturers and caregivers, and they don't, that's so much of the value that what my wife brings to our relationship is like, she wants to make sure people aren't getting hurt and that the feelings aren't getting hurt and all that kind of stuff. And then the balance that I bring is, the other side of that's like, it's okay. You got to let them do some stuff. Like, they won't die from a skinned knee. Like, they won't die from a cold. And then, so this is what makes the both of you a complete person, right? Is that you're bringing these very opposite sensibilities to the program, and hopefully, if we can figure it out, we're bringing a balanced approach that offers them a good structure that they can grow up in. But anytime, and that's one of the issues that we're getting way off on some of this stuff. But
well, I say that's because that's my missing rib that she got.
So there's I'll get sidetracked on all this stuff forever, but I was watching this Jewish guy go through that scripture in the original Hebrew, and it actually, the word that's used there for rib is a I think it's an architectural term that means the whole half of something, and so it's highly likely that it doesn't have anything to do with a rib, but it's like there's a whole half of the man.
Right.
And so it paints this picture that's not so much, that it's like a small piece, or it's like the putting together of the two making the complete person. Right. And, and there's a bunch of other stuff that I think is really interesting. Well, I know what I don't have,
and I know what my wife has, and yes, like the things that I lack, she has, and so us together, it is perfect.
Yeah.
So
wow, you guys have achieved perfection.
Can
we do a show on that? You could teach me how that's done, because I don't have any idea what I'm doing.
All you got to do is keep your eyes on Jesus.
Yeah.
So.
So one of the things I did want to also, not to totally shift gears away from that, because I think that's really good stuff, but one of the things I did want to kind of get into before we get out of here is back to the sheriff stuff. What are the things that you see that should be priorities that maybe aren't being addressed, or we're not doing as well as we could? And it seems that, like you've got, you see this role as a very like straightforward, pretty like well outlined position. And I know a lot of times with anything that gets political at all, which unfortunately the sheriff's office is, because you run, it's got this political component to it. So what are some of the things, and it's, not even necessarily criticism of what anybody's doing now or has done, but just things that you see that would be kind of your focus or part of your program, as far as, here's some areas that I think we need to get to this place with it. And, or we maybe need to not be so involved in this because it's really not in our lane. What kind of stuff like that are you seeing out there that you would like to address?
And I think this is probably like the biggest thing foundationally, and it's not just law enforcement, it's in any organization, is the value of people. And then in putting, in law enforcement, it's going to be, hiring the right employees, promoting the right employees, retaining the right employees. And when I say right employees, I mean quality, qualified employees that understand what their job is, what the mission is, that they're public servants and they do serve the people, what it means to be a servant. Because when you understand what it means to be a servant, the sacrifices you give are a lot easier because you have an understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. But hiring, retaining, promoting these high quality employees and give them the proper training and the proper value. People don't leave organizations; people leave people. So somebody who has a heart for law enforcement is always going to have a heart for law enforcement and want to do it. But they have to be valued. It's a really hard job that we do. There's a lot of sacrifices. Yeah. It's late nights, it's missing birthdays, it's missing holidays, it's missing, piano recitals of your kids and your family. You give so much of yourself to this job to keep us safe and secure that sometimes I think we forget to value those people that do that. If people are valued by their leadership and by their community and the people that they're serving, the service that they give is going to be way better than somebody who doesn't feel valued. They're going to want to come to work because they know what they're doing means something, and it means something to that person and the people that they're out working. So sometimes the culture in law enforcement can get us away from the issue, and I don't think it's just in law enforcement. I think it's in any business that people become just a name on a piece of paper or a number. But the importance of valuing people, it starts with the leadership, the example, the giving them the proper training and the tools and the resources that they need to be successful in their job, to mentoring them, to come alongside them and to show grace, because we're still human beings and we're going to fail. Yeah. We just hope and pray that the failures are not big failures, that we can come alongside and we can help them to overcome whatever that failure is. When we start valuing the employee, and the employees start valuing what they do, and we value the people that we're serving, I think that is fundamentally and foundationally probably the most important thing, is just to change the culture, to make sure, and I don't even want to say change the culture, because this is a continual process. It's never just, oh, hey, we got it and now we're done and it stops. No, the valuing of people, because it's relationships and because it takes so much investment into people's lives so that relationship is strong and they totally understand that they're valued. I mean, there really hasn't been a day in my career that I have not felt valued. And that's what gives me the excitement and the drive and the desire to keep doing what I'm doing and keep serving, is because of how I'm felt. Well, I think everybody in law enforcement, it's the greatest job ever. I want everybody in law enforcement to feel what I feel and to know what I feel, and and the only way that they can do that is if they feel valued, because I know that I'm where I am today because I've felt valued. So that is, that's a key component in being successful in what we're delivering to the public. It starts with good quality employees who know their job, who have that desire to serve, that are valued, and we give them the training and the tools and the resources that they need to be successful. Some of the tools and some of the training is going to be a collaboration. We need to work with other law enforcement agencies, civic groups, to be able to be successful in our job. We can't do it all by ourselves. I mean, we have to have these relationships with other agencies. If it's nighttime, there's not as many law enforcement officers working in the entire county. That's including state and city and county law enforcement agencies. There's not as many officers working and deputies working at night as there are during the day or on weekends or holidays. So if there's something that happens and they need help, well, where's that help coming from? Well, it's coming from these other agencies that are in our area. And so we have to have that relationship. We have to start collaborating together, working together. If you've got a small agency, like let's say Morton, and they don't have an officer on at the time, who is covering that area? Who's protecting those citizens while they're gone? Well, it's going to be the county, the sheriff's office. And we need to have these strong relationships. I think that, when we look at training for me is a huge thing, because knowledge is power. Like when you know what it is that you're supposed to do and how to do it, it makes the job so much easier and so much better. I think that we should have a countywide training cadre where everybody is trained to the same standard. Everybody comes to the training. Not only are they trained to the same standard in the same way, and so when they're backing each other up or doing things, everybody is on the same page, but it also builds relationships. And everything starts with a relationship. I'm going to do more for you, and I'm going to risk more for you because I know you and I have a relationship with you, versus, you're just another officer that I'm going to be here to help. But really, how in am I going to be? That brings up, I look at law enforcement as a family. And I know that others have said that it's more of a team, because we're a team working together towards a goal. I've been on teams. Team members can have disagreements and not like each other and don't want to work with each other, but they still work towards the goal to accomplish. I get that. But I don't think they work I think that if it's a family, and when I say family, I talk about my experiences in the family I came from. I know that some people might have come from a dysfunctional family, so their definition of family may be a little different. Right. My definition is from a functional family that, there were consequences, there was love, there was respect. We can have disagreements and we can get into things, but at the end of the day, the relationship, we overcome those we don't write off the relationship because of the disagreements. And so I think that, that bond is so much stronger with a functional family than it is with a team. Because even though a team, yes, we can still move forward to the mission and accomplish it, I think it's going to be done better and smoother when we have that family.
Yeah, because
bond.
With teams, you're doing something for a fairly short period of time. You're winning a game, you're completing a project. And I like that analogy. I'd not really heard that before, but I think it is different because you're like living life with each other, which is different than being on a team. And you're putting your life in each other's hands. And it's kind of a, you never know when you're going to have to jump up and go on duty, depending on the situation. And so you kind of have to be in that mind frame 100% of the time. It's not confined within, the lines of the field or the parameters of the project. Like it's an all day, everyday thing that you have to kind of, and I do think there's a difference there. I'd not heard that before, but I think that makes a lot of sense in that context. I really also like the idea, and I'd not heard anybody talk about this before either, but I really like the idea that you create a consistent product, for lack of a better term, throughout every division of law enforcement throughout the entire county, so that no matter which group you're interacting with, it feels the same. And I know like a lot of really successful kind of international or large national corporations, that's like the big goal is like if you walk into this Taco Bell in Santa Fe, New Mexico, or Chehalis, Washington, or Baton Rouge, Louisiana, it's exactly the same experience. And like that's really what they shoot for in all these kind of, the reason that if you show up in a town you don't know and you have the option of going to, Bill's sandwich shop or Subway, and you're really hungry, a lot of times you pick Subway. And the reason is, for better or for worse, you know exactly what it's going to taste like. Right. And so there's something to that. And you're talking, just to clarify, like you're talking, city police departments.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody who would be operating, and even other counties potentially that you lean on or work with regularly. Is that maybe on the table if those relationships can be established?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's always the more that we can collaborate and work together. But when you're looking here in the county, the sheriff's responsibility is to every citizen in this county. And so in order to truly know and be confident that they are getting the service that they expect and, that they need, is having everybody on the same page and trained, regardless if you're wearing a blue uniform or a green uniform. Yeah. That, if we're all training together as sheriff, I will know it doesn't matter if you're a Toledo officer, Winlock officer, Centralia officer, Morton officer, Chehalis officer, a deputy. Everybody is on the trained the same. They're at the same level, and that the product that they're getting is going to be across the board the same. I mean, that's important. If we get back to what we talked about before about sheriffs and what they do, chiefs and what they do. If a city chief wasn't there and you didn't have a city law enforcement, the responsibility for law enforcement would fall on the sheriff to provide that. So the sheriff should be supporting these chiefs in any way that they can to make sure that they have the tools and the resources that they need to complete it. They should be a help always, because if they weren't there, that would be the sheriff's responsibility to do it 24/7. And so I think that this collaboration and this working together, we're all on the same page. We're all building these relationships that will help us become more effective and efficient with the service that we're providing, keeping the citizens of this county safe.
Yeah. So where are we at on time? We probably right about that time.
1:26.
Yeah.
Oh, so, we're early.
Yeah, we're a little early, but I did have kind of one or two other things I wanted to get to. And so kind of my last question that kind of came up as we were talking is, if you were not running for sheriff and you were a voter, which obviously has been the case before, what would you say, like, what are the things that you would look at to determine, like, what are the most important things you would look at when you're analyzing, who's running, that you would look to and go, these are kind of my non-negotiables. These are the things that I think are important as a voter to consider, kind of taking yourself out of it.
So if I'm voting.
Yeah, if you're just voting for nameless, faceless candidates, like what are you looking at? What are the most important things in your mind that are going to determine who's getting your vote?
So for me, the first thing is that I look at is if they believe in the God that I believe in, if they're a Christian, because that will be on the face their guiding light on the decisions that they make. Their honesty, their humility, their service, their honor, all the qualities that I look to is going to be, that Christian foundation. Then it's to look to see what their testimony is. You can say all day long that you're a Christian and this is what you believe in and this is what you do, but
Right.
it really is your living testimony. It's that example. Do I see what you're saying reflected in your life, in the history of your life? That's important. Experience, knowledge, and I guess humility. We don't know everything. Sometimes we think we do, and we like to say we do, but the reality is we don't know everything. So we need to be humble enough to recognize that, and to build, a team of leadership around you that is going to help get the mission forward, and help the office succeed, not necessarily the individual, because it's not the individual's office. It's always the people's office. But it's about their ability to work with others, because we can't do it alone. To build these relationships, to me, that's so important. And putting the right people in the right positions. And you can, I would suggest look into people's history, because the history shows us a lot. I mean, it shows us a lot in our history, in different countries' history.
And I think
I don't want to end up repeating the same things that I've said, but really it becomes the foundation about the person, and especially in a public service position. It's that servant heart, understanding that they're here for the people, not for themselves. And it's the sacrifices that they're willing to do for the people. And I think their history shows that.
Yeah, kind of the why of what they're doing.
Right.
And I think, one thing, that I think what I hear a lot people say is that, they would like to see these kinds of things in our community be headed by people who make this an attractive place to work. So we're getting the best people. We're getting the kind of people that believe in what we're trying to do as a community, not people who are coming from outside going, well, we need to shape this community in the image of, Seattle, Olympia, Portland, wherever else they may come from. But they get what people here want, and have enough humility. It's kind of that, this keeps coming up in conversations, but that kind of Dunning-Kruger effect of, people who are competent usually question themselves, and people who are incompetent think they know everything,
right.
And so it's, so having that humility of, anytime, man, I've known some people, I've talked to people that are, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and people that are, I've been able to talk to some people who are actually in that billionaire category. And like one of the thing that in just all the books that you read, successful people tend to be people who go into all these, almost every situation, no matter how much success they've achieved, going, what can I learn here? They walk into rooms and go, what can I learn that I don't already know? It's interesting that, we tell people kind of the message for people who are younger is like, you got to know what you're doing and fake it till you make it and all this stuff. And I think there's something to being confident and having an attitude that I think I can figure out the things I don't know with the help of whoever is willing to help me.
Right. That's
different than just going, I know everything. And, trying to be the smartest guy in the room and making sure everybody knows it and all that kind of stuff. I think there is something to looking for humility in our politicians, because I guarantee no matter how smart you are, you're going to go into whatever public position, and there's going to be so much that comes across your plate. You don't have any idea what they're even talking about, know, because there's just all kinds of crazy stuff that only lives in that world.
And you can only educate yourself so much,
And knowledge
is one thing, but wisdom is another, and how to
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts.
Right.
Wisdom is the proper application of knowledge.
Yes.
And so it's not just that you know things.
Right. It's, are you, properly
wisdom
applying
is the
it?
proper application of those things. And that's why you see our intellectual class going off the rails all the time, because they're only concerned with intelligence and knowledge and not wisdom.
Right.
And wisdom is so much more
Well,
important.
and we learn wisdom through the experiences,
Yeah.
you know.
Either our own or
somebody
being
else,
humble
yes.
enough to understand. Yeah. And being wise enough to know what are real experiences or
Right.
or worthwhile experience. And almost all that stuff comes through failure. You know,
Yeah.
somebody messed something up one time, because you don't learn a whole lot from success.
No.
You know, I mean, I was talking to somebody recently, and they've got this this business that they're doing that they've started recently, and they're just killing it. And I said, you know, do you know why things are going so well? And they were like, not really. You know, it's like, and so
We're
they're
just we just hopped on, put our seatbelt on.
well,
and we're
yeah, and
taking the
sometimes
ride.
that happens. Like, you know, things get rolling, and so I see, you know, and you know, nothing to this person, they'll figure it out. But I've seen a lot of people where they get into an economy, and whatever it is that they're doing is just killing it, and so anybody with a shingle or a truck or whatever, like, can just make tons of money. But then
When
the
it
economy
tanks.
changes, and only the best survive. A lot of times those people that haven't experienced failure and had to go, oh man, I got to get way better at this. I got to change this thing or I'm not going to make it. Like, those are only things that you think after you screwed it up, or even when you did the very best you could, and maybe it wasn't your fault. It just didn't happen. Like, it didn't work.
Yeah.
And there's been, I mean, I've told my kids this a lot. I'm like, there's so many times in my life where I did the very best that I knew how to at that time. Like, had the heart, like, I did it for all the right reasons. I did the best that I could, and it did not work. And it's like, you know, every time that happens, you have to make one or two decisions. Like, I'm either just going to pack it in and this is, you know, I'm just not good enough, or you go, man, like, is there something I can fix? Like, can I get good enough?
Or some people do this. Well, I'm just going to double down.
Yeah.
Just keep going down
Yeah.
the same track instead of like, no, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my favorite Jim Rohn quotes is, you know, don't wish for things to be easier, wish you were better. You know? And I just learned, I mean, I've quoted Jim Rohn several times on this, but I just learned Jim Rohn was born in Yakima.
Really?
Come on.
Hey,
The great Northwest, man.
wisdom and knowledge wisdom is more valuable than gold. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's there is that, the importance of that wisdom. And if you don't have it, to surround yourself with people that do, so you can learn from that. But yeah, I mean, we all make mistakes and have failures. It's kind of, you know, you might think that, you know, my decisions that I'm making on these were the right decisions because I'm basing them on the experience and the knowledge that I have at the time. And
Right.
then somebody else goes, well, so now that you went through that, do you think that this might have been better if you have done this, this, and this? And it's like the light bulb comes on, the fog clears, and it's like, yeah, I wish I would have thought about
Yeah,
that.
that
then,
would have been
because
better.
That definitely sounds better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
No, I told my kids this too, you know, that I tell you stuff not because like I'm so much smarter than you. Like, it's not about an intelligence thing.
I got the T-shirt. I've been there, done that.
Right.
Right.
It's like my job as a parent is to try to help you see around corners that you haven't been to that place before. So how can you know it? You know, like, I remember growing up and like just from teachers and stuff, they would kind of give you this attitude of like, well, I'm just smarter than you are as a kid. And you're just like, you know, you kind of in your youth, you're like, give me a break. Like, I've seen your car, you know, like I know you drive to school in every day. Like, I don't want to be like you, but there's something
but
to
it runs.
Yeah. I mean, I had a nicer car in high school than some of my teachers, but I think there's some, I remember when my kids started getting into high school, I remember thinking like, well, I didn't like that line from people. And I remember thinking like, I wanted to let my kids know the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Like, and I would always go, you're getting to this place where, you're growing up and you are smart enough to do anything that I'm doing. The issue that you're going to run into is that you haven't lived long enough to be able to be wise about the things that you're intelligent enough to do. And it's not your fault. It's just because you're 16, like you've only lived these 16 years. And the only benefit that I have over you is that I've just lived a lot more years. I've seen how decisions that I've made and other people have made and how they've played out and where the errors might have been. So if I'm telling you stuff, it's not because I think you're stupid. It's not because I don't think you're intelligent enough to figure it out. But I'd like to help you see around the corners. There's that idea of the best person to take directions from is like the person who already drove through all the potholes.
Right.
Like they can tell you where they're at and how to not drive it. Like, don't take that road. It's terrible. Like, you can get there this way. It's way better. And so, I think sometimes we look to people and people that are pretending to be perfect and we go, we got to do that stuff. It's almost always the opposite. It's like the people that, you develop so much more humility in failure because you realize like sometimes, and often you do the very best you can and it's just not good enough. And so you have to be better if you want to get it next time. So it develops a humility in you because you've lost despite your very best efforts. Like if you do something dumb on purpose, like you ignore a warning, you don't get a whole lot out of that because you're like, well, everybody told me not to do that and I did it anyway, like a jerk.
So it's interesting because the other thing that does, like, and especially when we talk about relationship stuff and you're trying to help people and mentor them and, those failures and those lessons in humility and the wisdom that you get actually helps you to be able to show grace to others when you're communicating with them. Because, if you're a black and white person and you just have the knowledge and it's just, these are the rules, this is how it is.
Because you read a book.
Right. What it does is nowhere in there does it teach you grace and how to show grace to others. But when you go through those experiences and you go through those failures and you learn that humility and you're gaining that wisdom, it really helps you to be able to interact with people and deal with people, to be able to show them grace on things because, we're our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Most of us beat ourselves up more and do more to ourselves than somebody else could. When we mess up, we're really hard on ourselves but to be able to have somebody
some people are not hard enough on themselves.
Well,
but yeah, no, I know.
I mean, there's
saying.
a lot of us that are, maybe not everybody.
Yeah.
Like I know me.
That's a big word.
I know. Yeah, I know me. And the experiences of going through stuff and failure and having great examples of good leaders that can show grace and, because that's something that, humility and grace is, you have to go through things to learn that.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize that what's being done is grace, that they're showing me grace.
Yeah.
And
your default is like, I know. Like that's what, if you've ever had a kid or been around a kid, it's like, that's all they tell you is, I know. Like, you don't know literally anything. Like, you haven't figured out going to the bathroom yet. Like, you don't know. But, so you get like your kids doing that. And it just shows that that's a sign of immaturity and it's a sign of, and it's fine. But, I know means that you have no idea usually. Like,
I just hope the lessons that God teaches me are not like, do little things. Like, I don't want big major lessons.
Yeah. Hopefully you can avoid like, I told my kids this when they started getting a little older and kind of around driving age, or their friends were driving age. I'm like, there's some mistakes you can make that you only get to make once.
Right.
And you don't get to, let's call those out and help you avoid those.
Hey, I can learn from near misses.
Yeah.
I just don't have impact.
Yeah,
like
like-
I will learn from that.
Yeah, dude. When you're getting into like high school age, it's like you gotta make sure that cars you get into. I mean, that could be a mistake. It seems so trivial at that age, but it's like that could be a mistake you only get to make once, and then I can't help you after that because you're not alive. Or
yeah, how can you go off the road in dry pavement? Yeah, I don't know.
happens.
Yeah, it does.
I've heard tales.
I've heard it happens.
But
yeah, maybe
so
too fast. Maybe driving too fast.
I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that
heard it's
we
a
didn't
thing.
have cell phones back then.
Dude.
It was never an issue with being distracted.
Well, yeah, then it was just like, having 8 kids in a car and people just being distracting or not paying attention.
So my parents were smart. So my first car was a Chevy Sprint, a 3-cylinder little hatchback. You couldn't even, I had to have the seat all the way back so nobody could sit behind me just so I could have, enough room to drive.
Yeah.
So I think I could get 2 other people in my car. Yeah. So they were pretty smart. You can't go too fast in a little 3-cylinder front-wheel drive car.
Yeah. British cars.
Now in the snow, in an empty parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a buddy in high school. Anytime I would ride anywhere with him, dude, he would talk to me like this.
Oh
and
my
just
gosh.
Stare at me for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
It felt like an hour. I'm like,
It's like, bro, on the
I'm
road.
like, dude, we're on the freeway, man. Can you just, I can hear you if you just still look at the road. Yeah. Wild. We definitely took some trips in high school where there were too many people in the car.
Yeah.
People sitting on laps and the whole deal.
I guess there was a few times that we crammed several in my little car.
Yeah.
Way too many.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Kids don't do that.
hey, it was out of necessity.
I guess.
I think Burgerville was having their 25-cent.
Yeah, ours was
cheeseburgers or
we just didn't have. Nobody had enough money to get to the lake in more than one car. So everybody's changed together.
Just
we could
pile
get to
in.
the lake and back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, now it's
but that was also back when you would drive around here and not see another car on the road for 20 minutes.
well, that's true. A lot more fields out there. Man, the amount of houses and apartment complexes.
Who's doing that?
And stores and
Yeah.
yeah. I was just at Winco last night. So, not shopping. I was just there for work.
Just there for
But-
work. So it's
Yeah.
going well over there.
No, I mean,
No, everything's fine.
I'm pretty impressed with their employees there.
Yeah, well, they're employee owned.
Yeah. No,
So their employees get ownership,
got-
profit bonuses and things, right?
yeah, when you steal from Winco, you're stealing from the employees. That's a no-no.
I've talked to several people about this, and this is way off topic, but I'm always intrigued when a company figures out how to do that. If you can figure out how to have everybody in the company have
Buy-in?
tangible,
It's
tangible
because they have
investment.
buy-in.
Right.
They're invested in that. And this comes back to how do you look at valuing your employees? Well, this is a huge one because you're valuing your employees to the point where they're actually owners of the company.
Yeah, no, it's if your value proposition is trading time for money, then the incentive structure is fragile.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because then the person has to show up with their own set of internal values that keep them productive and all those kinds of things. If you can figure out a system where you're actually incentivizing them through their pay,
Right.
to have a much higher level of concern. You're not relying on that person to have all that stuff just ingrained in their character.
Well, and how many people will do this? Okay, yeah, you're just paying for my time with this amount of money, but I can go to a Morgan Wallen concert and not come to work because my time would be more self-serving.
Well, and then then it becomes
you make these choices of, well, this is actually, even though I'm not going to get paid for that day, this is this is better for me.
Yeah, well, and
This is
even
the better choice that I want.
even on a daily basis. It's the challenge becomes, well, you're paying me to be here for an hour.
Yeah.
not to produce. And then so then you have to, it's the carrot and stick thing where
Gets
now
back.
now you're having to like bark at everybody all the time to make sure they stay productive during the hour.
So it gets back to the question that you asked.
Yeah.
Those values and the morals that we have foundationally for who we are going to elect, to me, is important. Their values, their morals are very important.
Yeah, and leadership ability, that whole idea of that you attract what you are, not what you want. If you have, I think that's really important as we're looking at people, and I hope to get a little bit more of that out there for folks to be able to get, because I think, if you're heading an organization, I don't think people, I did not, so maybe I'm projecting on this, but I had no idea how much impact, going back like 5 or 6 years ago, like how much impact the unelected people that just get hired by an elected person that stay there forever, oftentimes because of union rules and all that stuff. Like, no matter how bad a job they do, they can't get fired.
No, but that's not true. That's a misconception right there.
Well, that may be true, but that's what gets.
But this is what it comes down to. It comes down to supervisors, leadership is not properly documenting. We don't want to just get rid of people. I mean, especially in law enforcement.
Sure.
It's hard to get hired. I mean, the process to get hired, the background, the polygraph, the psychological, I mean, we invest a lot in them, and then they have to successfully complete the academy. We invest a lot into the people that we hire. So it's like, okay, how do they end up going off the rails? Well, it becomes the supervision. Like, if there's an issue and you address the issue right away, and sometimes it's just a talking to, or let's give you a little more training if that's where you're deficient in. But if we ignore that and we let that go, everybody can know, oh, that guy's lazy. He never does this, and he's been here for years, and everybody knows that. Well, you can know it and see it, but if it's not, if you haven't gone through the right process, that's what gets us in trouble in leadership, is that we're not doing our job. The first and foremost, if you deal with it right away and it's something little, it never starts building. I mean, it's like the snowball effect, that
That's
you
like
can
a
make a little snowball and you can roll it down the hill. If you want to keep it small and you want to get rid of it, stop it. If it keeps going and going and going, now this little tiny snowball is this big, like, snowman base, like boulder. I mean, that's the reality. And sometimes you have people in leadership, they don't like confrontation because of how it makes them feel. It's like, it's not about the feeling. Confrontation is hard, but if you have the right heart and the right attitude and know that, I don't like having to sit down with an employee and talk to them about something that's negative.
Yeah.
So I make sure that I talk to them about all the stuff positive, that they're doing, so that when and if I do have to talk to them, we've already had this relationship. I feel like I can talk to them about it, that they know that I'm here for them and to help them. And it's not a negative. It's not it's not like, oh, the end of the world.
Well, it's built out of something different. Yeah. I mean, if you're telling guys this is always something I've tried to be better at, because I just, it's probably hard for some people to believe, but I've always been really introverted and I don't really talk to people. And I actually had to develop that when I was in New York, because I didn't know anybody, and everybody hated quiet people out there. It was not,
because you'd end up standing in a corner and not getting anywhere.
No, and
you have to be.
And they just assume if you're not saying something that you're like scheming something. So it's like a lot of time. So, anyways, I had to develop that aspect, and but yeah, no, I think one thing growing up, I always would think stuff like, I'll watch a comedy thing and I don't laugh a lot. I just go in my head, I go, that's funny.
You're laughing.
Like I don't even laugh in my head. I just go, that was funny, wow. And I think it, so like, I'm just not very expressive, but I had to, and I'm still not great at this for sure. But what I tried to do better at is, if I think something, especially if it's a good thing, that I say it, to the person.
Yes.
Like while I'm thinking it. So I started trying to get into the habit of even just texting people if I was thinking about them. because we all, especially guys like our age, like you get into this mode where it feels like nobody knows where you're at, what you're doing, and cares who that you're doing a lot. You're caught in the middle of a lot of things.
I have 3 phones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, just even if I was thinking about somebody I hadn't talked to a while, I start going, like, I should just let them know, hey, I was just thinking about you. Hope you're doing good. Just so that they're not, but if I got guys working on a job site or even subcontractors that don't work for us necessarily, it's like, if they're doing a good thing, I should let them know so that that it's not the only time I talk to them is when I'm crapping on them, or going bad. Like, hey, you can't do this, with my wife or my kids. Like, I'm not great with that stuff because I internalize a lot of things just naturally. So I have to remind myself to say like, hey, good job with that, or I appreciate you doing this little thing or whatever. Yeah. So that way, I think it is important that way when the time comes, it's not like, oh, all you ever do is
come down on. Yeah.
Because you don't want to be that guy, and you don't like people like that either. So like, you got to try to figure out how to not be that person.
And relationships take effort.
Yeah.
I mean, they take a lot of effort. It's communication and it's listening.
And doing things that aren't natural.
Oh, yeah, because it's so much easier to just like keep everything in and just be a recluse. Yeah. You're in your own little world. But we need people.
Yeah.
And, we thrive better with people. And when you're around good people and good people around you, it just makes it so, that's actually the same thing.
Yeah.
But
synergy.
But you know what I mean? Like it really does, you can have a negative employee that affects everybody.
Oh yeah.
And so it becomes, well, why are they negative? It's, let's build that relationship. Yeah, because you know what? It's usually a relationship issue because people truly do need people. I say that I don't like talking in front of people or being around people. But I do enjoy it. I enjoy people.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy being the center of attention, but I enjoy being around people.
Yeah.
And that's what, goes back to, that's what this is all about. Like, this is a government of the people. Like, we are, the relationship side is probably the most important thing, is building relationships with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That feels like a good place to wrap it up. But so if somebody wants to get more information on the campaign, where do they go? No idea?
They can go to our website. Okay.
Which is?
So I am not a social media or web page expert.
That's right.
So, and I have no idea what it is. I think it's like Tracy Murphy for sheriff.com or something like that.
Okay. Well, send it to me. We'll throw it in the link.
Okay.
And same thing if they want to contribute, get involved, help out, whatever.
And I've got a great group that is running my campaign. Now the majority of them are family or extended family. Well, actually, I think all of them are. They're either my law enforcement family or they're my actual family. My girls are doing a fantastic job with stuff. Unfortunately for me, I end up working, 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
So I'm gone and they're taking care of that stuff. And I spend my weekends and my nights making phone calls to people, calling them back and responding. And so, but no, it's good.
Yeah. So, yeah. We'll throw that that link in there.
Okay.
And vote. If you're not registered, get registered.
Vote and educate yourself.
Yeah. Even if you're not going to vote for Tracy Murphy, just get registered.
No. Vote for Tracy Murphy.
You should.
If you want to be safe and secure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vote for Tracy Murphy.
But even if that's not your intention, get out. Just people need to get registered.
They do. Participate in this. It's your civic duty.
People have died. Lots of people have died to give us the right to have our say, and do it, for no other reason. There's people all over the world that do not have the ability to vote.
Right.
Let's not take this for granted. Let's be informed voters. We'll try to help with that effort in whatever little way we can. Let's
be the salt of the earth.
Get registered, get informed, do your best to do that. Make sure you vote. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Can we have you back again? I'd
You're
like
welcome.
to talk to you sometime about the JNET stuff you do
Yeah.
and all those kind of things going on. So
Yep,
yeah,
I can.
get you back for that maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like talking.
Yeah,
So-
I know, me neither.
Yeah, nah, yeah, no. Anytime you want to have me back.
Yeah, because
we'll-
I think that's that would
we
be.
can talk about the
really
drug problems.
interesting.
We can talk about
I've got so many.
cartel-based stuff. Yeah,
Got
we
so many questions and so many theories on that stuff. I'd love to bounce off you. So
Okay.
we'll have to do that again sometime. So
right on.
all right. Well, thanks. Good to see you, man.
Good seeing you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks. All right. See ya.
Bye.